Calumet Editions, an eclectic publisher of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry, introduced a new business model nearly a decade ago, in which the publisher and author work as equal partners in a joint venture. Their stable of authors have won numerous and prestigious prizes across literary forums. Where traditional publishers fail to see the value in projects, Calumet cooperates with his authors in realizing a book's potential.
Welcome to Writer's Corner, and we're with you once again. Unusually, we have a single guest, but he's a special single guest as opposed to our usual two-writer forum. And welcome, Joe Schmit.
Well, thank you, Alan. And I am married, but I'm a single guest.
Yes.
Just get that straight. My wife wanted to make sure I mentioned that.
Well, in this political day, who knows what. Joe Schmit is a very unique individual. He's won 19 Emmys, Lord knows how many other awards. He is a speaker. He is the sports director of KSTP-TV. He really hosts on Sunday night what I think is Minnesota's only really good sports show with Doogie and Chris Long.
Well, thank you.
And it's just a pleasure to have him here. But he's here today to talk about one of his three books, and that's The Right Thing to Do, which he co-authored with Joe Mauer. I suspect that Joe's name is on there, but I think you did most of the authoring.
Yeah, Joe actually did not want to write the book because Joe's a humble guy, and and obviously Joe's the hero in the book. So Joe said, "I'm all behind the project, 100%." And then when we decided that 100% would go to two great charities, he was on board. His wife Maddie was on board, and it's been a phenomenal ride so far.
We should mention the fact that all the proceeds of this book go to several charities.
Yeah.
Speaking of charities, you're very involved with Big Brothers and Sisters, among others. So you have a celebrity golf tournament
that's now retired.
But it raised what, $4.5 million?
Yeah, over 16 years, we had a lot of great sponsors and volunteers, and it's kind of funny on the charity deal, and this book's kind of a prime example of it. When you do something for other people, so many good things come back in return, whether it's relationships or business relationships, or just fun. This book, because of this book, Joe and I were on the Kelly Clarkson show. Because of this book, I was asked by the Baseball Hall of Fame to give a presentation in the Baseball Hall of Fame to a jam-packed room, and afterwards they sold out all the books we had there. And the guy told me it was the most they've ever sold. And so it's just amazing what happens when you put your heart first and don't worry about the other things.
And the Mind Over Matter Fund is another one of your charities. There's so many charities that you're involved in. As I said to you before we went on air, I don't know where you find the time.
I like being busy, and so does my wife. And so it's just, I've been given a platform on Channel 5, and why not? When people reach out, if I have time, I say yes.
As you're doing here today.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the fact that now that I'm an author, I think after 3 books I can call myself an author.
Absolutely.
But now that I'm an author, I appreciate the process, the art of not only writing the book, but publishing the book and promoting the book and getting it in front of the people who you want to read it. I mean, it's a lot of work. There's a lot of people out there that say, I have a book in me, but there's a lot more to it. You know that, Alan.
Oh, believe me.
Yeah.
Just yesterday, I shot somebody and killed somebody, and had to be involved in more research, which my background in law really has helped me as an author with the research. And
I was wondering how come the police cars were out front here.
Yeah, absolutely. They're waiting for me. My picture is up in the post office, and what can I tell you?
Yeah, but the art of storytelling is, I had a friend of mine once tell me, use what you got to get what you want. And one of my abilities is to tell a story. And I do it on TV, and I was able to do it as a professional speaker. I keynote, I'm a business keynote speaker. I've spoken all over the country. And then obviously when I write. And not only is there an art to storytelling, but there's a power to storytelling.
You relate to people, though. Whether it's your writing or whether it's you as a Toastmaster, you speak on a level that really relates to people, as opposed to somebody who speaks and it goes over their heads. There's not a great amount of sophistication to it. There's genuineness to it, and there's relatability to it, and that's really, I think, what your success is.
Well, that's very nice of you. I love the fact you use genuine. I try my best to be genuine. When I first started speaking, I have an uncle who is now he's a retired preacher, and he heard me speak very early on when I was just trying to figure out who I was as a speaker. And afterwards he said, you had some good jokes and some good stories and stuff, but he goes, can I give you a little advice from a guy who sat in the pulpit for 30 years? And I said, yeah, please. He said, show them your heart. Show them your heart. So I always remind myself before I get on stage, before I'm doing a presentation, before I write a book, show them your heart, and that will be genuine.
So let's talk about your heart in this book. Give us the genesis of how this book came about.
So I had heard, so one of the main stories in this book is about how Joe, when he was at Cretin-Derham Hall High School, Joe was the big man on campus. Joe was the best high school athlete the state's ever produced. You've interviewed him.
Yes, absolutely. And he could have gone on and been a great football player.
Yeah.
I'm glad he didn't. He's certainly, we should mention that timing being everything, he went into the Hall of Fame this year. You did a presentation at the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. This is not my first rodeo. The timing was kind of planned by me on that. Just let you know, Al, I was planning on him getting in the Hall.
Yeah. He's got the best statistics of any catcher in baseball.
In that one era,
yeah.
You can put him up against Johnny Bench and Pudge Rodriguez and Yogi Berra. It's pretty incredible. But anyway, so Joe was this big athlete, and the story that I heard was Joe noticed a young student who was blind eating in the lunchroom by himself. And Joe on his own invited a guy by the name of Mike Halley to go and sit down at their table, and then the impact that it had. So what I did is when I wrote my first book, Silent Impact, and that's what I speak about. I speak about being an impactful leader, how you can impact a culture, a company, how we can all be more aware and intentional. This had to be one of the stories. So I put my reporter's cap on, and I found 6 guys who sat around that table every day with Joe and Mike. And the stories started to come in because the impact was not only then, it's still today. So I wrote that story in my first book, Silent Impact. I tell that story in my keynote speeches, and it's become kind of my signature story. Well, my publisher, Wise Inc., approached me and said, why don't you write a children's book? Because I had written 2 other books. And I said, I'm not a children's author. And they said, give it a try. So before I even started writing, I thought I better talk to Joe and Maddie. So I had breakfast with Joe and Maddie, and we talked about it. So what if we do this project? And I came up with the idea of let's give it to a couple of charities. We can talk about that later. And they were 100% on board. Because I knew if I had Joe on board, we could sell a lot of books, we could make a lot of money for these charities, and hopefully we would inspire conversations with children and families about the values that this book portrays, values of kindness, compassion, and inclusivity. They're all in this book. And once Joe and Maddie...
That story in and of itself is so interesting because here's a kid sitting all by himself who has vision problems, if not being blind completely, and typical of who Joe Mauer is, he went over and invited him to his table. And the kid became a real part of that group that had lunch every day.
Well, in what we try to do when we talk to kids and read the book to kids, we talk about, they all became great friends with Mike. Nobody knew Mike was a huge sports fan. Mike was a huge sports fan. So at that table with all these guys who played sports with Joe, he could tell you how many points Kevin Garnett scored the night before. He could tell you all about the big trade that was happening. Mike was totally on top of it all. And so it's there was a teacher who monitored that lunchroom who was so inspired he wrote a poem, and I included it in the Silent Impact book. And the poem was Lunch with Mike. In it said, "Joe, for the rest of your career, people will judge you by what you do with a bat and a ball, but they don't know you. I know you because of what I saw you do every day at Cretin-Durham Hall." So he saw that, and he saw the impact that it had, and it's just fun to continue that, and hopefully.
A sensitive individual. He really is.
Just, I mean,
he's the all-American boy. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
He is the national. He is, whoever you want to describe as being the model athlete.
Alan, I've covered them all. The biggest names in Minnesota sports, and I've had interviews with a lot of huge people. Without a doubt, the humblest superstar I've ever met is Joe Mauer. And it's real. It's genuine, and because of that, hopefully we can have an impact on future generations just by reading this book.
It really, and I was happy to hear that it's selling very well.
Yeah, we're selling a lot of copies, and we're making a lot of money for the charities, and there's some other big things that are happening with this book I can't even announce yet, but this is not the end of this book. It's going to come out in another genre.
Good.
I'll tell you about that later.
That's exciting. So tell us about the other chapters in this book.
Well, there's a couple of stories, and the reason the book, I should mention this, the reason the book is called The Right Thing to Do. So after I had done the research on the story and talked to the guys who sat around that table, and I started etching out, you start writing, and you just kind of write it. And so I go to Joe, and I interviewed Joe, and I said, Joe, why did you do this? And I'm trying to portray, you're the big man on campus. People should be fawning all over you. And they were. There were high school kids he competed against asking him for his autograph when he was in high school. That's how good he was. And Joe's answer was very simple, because it was the right thing to do. So when it came to naming the book,
it's right there.
It didn't take very long to get through this thick head.
Right in your lap.
Yeah, so that's why it became the right thing to do. And anyway, so other stories in the book. Joe was always the first person chosen, or Joe was the captain to choose. He would pick the kid who was always the last person picked. Joe broke a window once, hitting a baseball. And you can imagine in his neighborhood, he hit it too far. He wanted to run. He went and told his dad. His dad told him the right thing to do was to go and talk to the neighbor and pay for the window. And Joe had to work it off and pay for the window. So it's just, examples of doing the right thing. And Alan, I mentioned values before, and I think too many times now we are so busy. Sometimes we don't talk the values about kids. We kind of expect them to know. Schools are so busy.
It's a diminishing quality in our lifestyle. I really think the values are so important.
Yeah.
And as I look at our political spectrum, I realize that if people maintained the feeling of value of life, of how precious it is, what they can accomplish by living a good life, it's a whole different story than some of the things we see today.
And you can even add Mike to that equation, because what those kids found out, Mike was different because he was blind, he sat by himself, he walked with a cane, and all of a sudden when they got to know him, they found out how much they had in common. And I think sometimes that's in our political system. I think if we kind of got together and put all the stuff away and just talk, we'd find out we really have a lot more in common than all the stuff we hear.
And no, I am a big Joe Mauer fan. I have been since I first, got to not only know him, but just to see how he models his life. And it's so great that you were able to capture that in here. The story about the window, the story about picking the student who was left out. The last one is always the first one he picked on his team. That would have been me.
Yeah.
But
well, and that's the beauty of literature, right? Because you can put yourself in the story. You can imagine what it looks like and what that character feels like. And that's the beautiful thing about a story. I should also mention one other thing, Alan, that when we launched this book, we were able to get some sponsors and people who donated to help in the process. And we have now donated this book to over 500 schools. So
That's incredible.
If people donate, we will make sure these books get in the hands of schools and kids. And then I get letters and emails from principals and homeroom teachers and second and third and fourth grade teachers saying that they read this story and it just opens up the conversation. And that's exactly what the goal of this book was.
Well, let's tell people where they can get it.
Yeah. The best place to get it is joemauerbook.com. joemauerbook.com. It's also available on Amazon and on my website, joeschmit.com. But go to joemauerbook.com, best place to get it. That way the charity gets most of the money. We like to keep the cost down as best we can. It's always fun to be writing those checks to the charities.
So, can I ask you a baseball question?
Sure.
Absolutely. Deviating somewhat. The Twins won the division last year and went on even into the playoffs more successfully than they have been. They cut payroll by $35 million.
Yep.
Explain the logic of that to me.
Well, it's, as the fan, there's no logic. As the business side of it, the whole TV contract, they lost a lot of money on it. We don't know exactly how much money they lost on it, but the ownership decided that they weren't going to spend a lot of money this year, which is really a shame because this roster is set up with another piece or two to really...
They have such great players. They need a little bit more pitching, but they have such great players out in the field, or they have a surplus of great players, really.
They could have made a big trade, but they did not want to take on any more payroll. And I think it's kind of a shame because what I have figured out in sports is teams have windows. You have windows when you can be successful, when your players are in their prime, when you have the right mix of young, old, and great leadership in a good clubhouse. The Twins have that right now. And the American League is pretty wide open. If they had added a piece or two.
Certainly this division is pretty wide open.
Yeah. So it's a little bit unfortunate. Maybe the timing's bad. I do think that at a certain time you got to go for it. I think that without ripping the owners too bad, I think other ownership in town, if you look at the ownership of some other franchises, would have gone for it. Because you get, on the backside, you're going to get paid money. The interesting thing, they wanted to...
You're saying just what is in my head.
Yeah, well, and here's the other thing. They're down like 80,000 fans. They're on pace to be down 80,000 fans this year after winning the division. That's not a good thing.
No, certainly not.
So the TV thing obviously hurts, but
TV coming back tomorrow, as a matter of fact,
you
as we
have to
sit
pay
here
more
on
money
July
for it.
31st. Yeah.
You got to pay more money for it.
Yeah.
It's money, money, money.
Well, the name of the game is more than money, though, and to fans, to seniors, to people who were disabled, who were in the hinterlands, who relied on the Twins, it's been almost criminal that they couldn't get the team this year.
Yeah,
and
it really is. And it's unfortunate because with Joe going in the Hall of Fame this year, and I was out in Cooperstown, and they had this wonderful party for Joe where there were 10 Hall of Famers who wore the Twins uniforms in this room, and it was just fantastic.
I saw a picture of that. Yes,
and this is a highlight for this franchise. Because I want to ask you this question as a baseball fan, who is the next Minnesota Twin in the Hall of Fame? I mean, it's going to be a long time before the Twins can have this party again. I don't know who it is.
Royce, if he comes around.
And Royce, if he stays healthy.
And stays healthy, absolutely.
Correa would have to have, Correa needs to win a couple of World Series, probably.
Yes, he does.
He certainly would be in consideration.
He's an inspirational player in terms of leadership. No question in my mind about that.
One of the better leaders I've seen. He really is. He examines the game. He works hard. Alan, the one thing that I've figured out covering sports for all these years, if you ever see a pro athlete who gets past the 10-year mark in their career, that means they have a lot of athletic ability. That's kind of a given. But that means they learned how to be a pro. That means they learned how to be good in the clubhouse and the community. that means that they learned how to take care of their body, their mind, their soul, all the things that go along with it. That means they surrounded
keep themselves clean.
Surrounded themselves with the right people. And Joe Mauer, I'll give you a little example on Joe Mauer. Did you ever read anything bad about Joe Mauer?
You know, I don't think that a curse word has ever escaped his lips. If it has, it's escaped me.
Yeah, he's human, but it just, you know, I think he got kicked out of one game in his career.
Yeah.
But you know, it was just, you know, that's the kind of guy, when they give these big money contracts. I remember when Kirby Puckett signed his 5-year, $30 million contract. And at that time, it was outrageous how much Kirby was making. And Andy McPhail got up there and said, you know, we don't give this contract just because he can hit the baseball and catch the baseball. We give this contract because of what he does and who he is in the clubhouse and the community. And that never kind of escaped me, because I think that what happened is when teams get in trouble, they forget that part. They give a lot of money because they can bat and they can throw the baseball. And if they don't have the other part of it, the next thing you know, they're burning a contract. You know, they're not very happy with that at the end.
So is Joe really out of baseball now, or is there some future in baseball for Joe?
Joe's coaching his son, Chip. Chip is 5 years old, and Chip has Joe's left-handed swing. It's pretty crazy. And he has 2 little daughters, and they play softball and soccer and do some artsy things. And I think Joe is really enjoying being a dad. I know he's part of the car dealership, the Mauer dealership. Yeah. I think he does some work there. But I don't think Joe will get back in baseball. I think he's going to be raising his kids. And you know, in this process, I knew Joe's mom and dad for a long time, but I interviewed Teresa for a special we did on Joe Mauer, and you kind of find out where the good raising came from. She said, I said, what was the discipline like in your house? And she said, well, there was no gray area. And I thought about that for a second. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, if you made the mistake, you got punished, and there were consequences. And apparently Jake Sr., the dad was like, you're grounded for a month. And then Teresa would have to calm him down a little bit. But it made me think that, you know, too many times parents live in that gray area today. I know I did as a parent. You know, it's because you wanted your kids to like you and be friends. But however it is, it worked pretty well for the Mauers, because all the Mauer kids are that way.
And it really speaks well. It's really unfortunate that his father wasn't alive to see this Hall of Fame induction, because it would have been so meaningful. He was such a part of Joe's life. Yeah, and his grandfather, you know, Jake Sr., you know, lived with the family, and so he basically, you know, helped those kids play baseball during the day. And then Joe's dad invented the Mauer quick pitch, quick swing. And there was this tube thing that would come down, the ball would drop, and you had to swing. It helped you get a swing faster. Well, Joe would hit baseballs out of it. He got so good they wore out nets, and the baseballs became too easy. He started hitting golf balls. You know, and I was like, I've tried it once. Hitting a baseball's hard. Well, he's one of the best natural athletes that I have ever seen. And, you know, you have the feeling that there's no sport that he could engage in that he couldn't be top of the drawer. So Justin Morneau is Joe's best baseball friend. You know, Justin Morneau from Canada. They were roommates, you know, early in their spring training and in their careers. And Justin tells the funniest story. He goes, you know, Joe was good at everything. He said, we'd play ping pong. The next thing you know, Joe's beating everybody playing ping pong. And he said one day some Michael Jordan music came on the radio, and the next thing Joe's dancing, and he's doing the moonwalk across the floor. And Morneau looks at him and says, you can moon dance too? He goes, he does everything well. And it's just, you know, he is natural. He golfed in this professional tournament, you know, where they had all these pro athletes. Yeah. I had talked to Joe 2 weeks before. He had golfed twice all year. He went and took 15th place in this tournament, which had, you know, all these pro athletes who, you know, are scratch golfers who golf all the time. Joe hadn't hardly picked up a club, and he finishes 15th in this tournament that was filled with really good golfers. Well, that's as you know, backs up what I said, natural athlete, and just whatever he does,
Well,
he
the other
does
thing,
well, and he's a role model in
Yeah.
whatever he does.
the other thing, Alan, that's pretty cool because Joe is calm and humble. And I talked to his mom about this because at times she goes, I wondered if he had a pulse. But they actually literally figured out that when the pressure was on Joe the most, his heart rate would lower. And you think about that. And he was a really good clutch hitter. He broke up 3 no-hitters in the 9th inning. He won those batting titles, with pressure on him to win those batting titles, 3 of them. So it was like, that is just the way he's built as part of his DNA.
And people don't understand that catching is a really arduous position to play. He was catching, unfortunately he had some health problems, but
Yep.
he was catching and batting incredibly, and won a batting title, as a matter of fact.
3 of them.
And 3 of them, yeah.
Yeah. So, but it was fun to see his plaque. The first time, you said you interviewed Joe a couple times. First time I interviewed Joe, he was a sophomore in high school. And I thought to myself, wow, this kid's got kind of the no pulse thing. I said, boy, he's kind of a calm, humble kind of guy. Well, 30 years later, when he's in the Baseball Hall of Fame, he's kind of a calm, humble guy.
And it's a great testament to him and to you that you captured it in this book.
And you know what I'm really happy about, Alan, is his wife Maddie and their team. And when we got together, they admitted that they had many authors, want to write the Joe Mauer story. And I was the first one who came to him and said, let's make this a charity deal. I should mention the 2 charities, if that'd be all right.
Absolutely.
One's a Thumbs Up for Mental Health, which is a charity that literally started because of the book Silent Impact and the Joe Mauer story. It's for kids battling mental health issues. It started in Elk River. Now it's in 3 school districts in the northwest suburbs. And they have a program called No One Sits Solo, based on the Joe and Mike program. And the second charity is Joe's favorite charity, and that's the Highland Friendship Club in St. Paul. And what they do is they work with children and young adults with disabilities to make sure that they can participate, whether it's baseball, bowling, hockey, whatever. They help them get out and do things that others maybe would not do.
So typical of what you would expect with Joe Mauer.
Yeah, totally. And it's that grassroots thing. And so these 2 charities are small charities that do tremendous work.
The book is the right thing to do. It's the Joe Mauer story. The author is Joe Schmit of KSTP-TV, and it's been a real pleasure to talk to you and
I love
talk a
every
little
minute.
baseball and
Yeah.
and a little bit of the book. And
Well, thank you for what you do and for helping authors, in the Minnesota area and all over the country.
it's our pleasure. Joe, thank you so much.
Thank you.